This is Red Dog Terrain. Welcome back to the shed. Today we're building a performer's stage. Credit where credit is due. I 100% took this idea from Wyloch at Wyloch's Armory. Link in the description. In his tutorial, Wyloch was making an inn. He wanted to keep the 1 inch by 1 inch squares for playability and movement, but wanted to have a wooden floor. I wanted a similar idea. I took some cardboard from a notebook, spread out a good layer of PVA, and then laid out coffee stir sticks I regularly steal from the gas station by the house. 4 sticks is conveniently 1 inch wide. I drew lines perpendicular to the sticks to get 1 inch squares. I forgot to film that part, but I'm hoping you can imagine it. Then I cut a rectangle of XPS foam with a beveled front. I also cut out 4 post and cross beams. I cut the side of the floor to make planks and textured it with my gnarly wire brush. Then I cut out notches for the beams to slide into. Then came the best part of the build. I notched out the stir stick squares where the beams were, spread on some glue, and laid out the tiles. Importantly, I made sure the tiles alternated in direction. I don't know how realistic this way of doing a floor is, but in a world of dragons and steam-powered flying ships, I guess realism isn't super important. One mistake I made was not Mod Podging and or painting the foam before I laid the squares. It was a real pain trying to hide the foam. Robert Frostbolt arrived at another small town, most likely devoid of culture. He would probably spend his days standing on an apple cart, delivering his perfectly curated words to unintelligent dirt farmers. However, he was surprised they had a small stage. Though a little disheveled, it would be better than the alternative. He was actually rather surprised by the intricately and expertly laid floor. A few hours later, he threw back the curtain and stepped out onto the stage. His purple cape swirled as he marched around the rostrum so all could see him. The children excitedly clapped, while the hard-working townsfolk nodded in reluctant contentment. He took center stage and scanned the crowd. He took a moment to look directly into the eyes of all who attended. With a voice that both commanded and soothed, he began. 2 roads diverged in a fay wood, and I took the one less traveled by. I built some rather simple steps out of dollar store foam board and attached them. Then I covered everything in the secret sauce. I made sure not to get any on the stir stick floors because it absorbs so easily. After that, I painted all the foam in latte brown. It was somewhere at this point that I realized how flimsy the beam across the front was. I considered putting a beam in the middle, but that wouldn't make any sense. So I put a stir stick across the front of the beam, thinking it would match the floor and look like decoration. It was still weak, so I put one across the back of the beam. However, I wasn't really happy with the way it looked. So I cut it out and would eventually replace it with a wooden dowel. After that came washes of light brown, dark brown, and black, a dry brush with light buttermilk, and then more washes. Robert was packing his gear in the small wagon attached to a steed when a young boy approached him. "Mr. Frostbolt?" "Yes." "I really liked the words you said. I didn't understand most of them, but your costume looked really good, and you looked real pretty on the stage." Robert smiled and patted the boy on the shoulder. "Thank you. Truly." It was these simple exchanges that made the life of a traveling performer worth it. He would think about them often as he made his way to the next town. cut a dowel to fit across the front and painted on the contrast paint Agrex Earthshade. I didn't want to use regular paint because I was hoping to keep some of the wood texture. Then I cut a strip of bright green fabric that I found in one of the closets upstairs. Off camera, I put holes along the top of the fabric so the dowel could go through. Then I used a light brown wash to dirty it up. The final step was to attach it across the front. I'm moderately pleased with how this turned out. I really like the floor, but I think I could have done something different to make it more visually interesting. Maybe down the road I'll make another attempt at this, something more grandiose.